This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek. And one of the issues that we have discussed in the past on WorkWeek is the issue of education, public education, and particularly the crisis facing City College, Community College in San Francisco, the threat to its existence, the massive cutbacks, and the ongoing battle to protect the community college, which is been built up over many decades. And recently, the students' HEAT, Higher Education Action Team, and the CCSF Collective issued a report card on the role and the practices of the present Board of Education, or Board of Trustees of San Francisco City College. And joining us to discuss this report card and what it means and how it was developed and what it means for the people of San Francisco is Rick Baum. Rick Baum is a lecturer at San Francisco City College, a member of AFT 2121, and also Madelyn Mueller, who is the chair of the Department of Music at City College. And they're both have been longtime activists and organizers, expanding to defend San Francisco Community College. So welcome to WorkWeek.
Welcome, thank you.
So Madelyn, why don't you talk about this report card and what some of the key issues in the report card that you think are important for the people of San Francisco on the record of the Board of Trustees.
Report card taking the board as a whole, but of course we have two incumbents up for re-election, and so focusing on them. There have been, the trustees have really given into a lot of the, what we'll call the privatization movement out there. They seem either not able to understand the implications of all that they're voting for, or they do, and they're still just joining in with some of the political forces that are downsizing, that make it very difficult for the students to enroll. Whole departments that are for community interests are being decimated, have been by board votes, the closures of areas. They always say budget, 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 but then there's this mysterious fact that a few years ago we had 50 million excess in the budget and it just sort of disappeared. So there doesn't seem to be appropriate oversight in the budget situation. This is put into a few of the comments in the overall report card, which is an F down. This is what is happening at the board level with board votes is not maintaining the health of a very viable, healthy institution up until about 8 years ago when it was taken over illegally by the state, and we just are going still down that path. The board has not effectively stopped that downward spiral.
What is happening? Why are these actions taking place? The transfer of Balboa to a private developer when historically it's been used by San Francisco City College, and the AFT 2121, the San Francisco Labor Council, called for it to be transferred to City College for City College to develop it as a community college site. And that was where the Performing Arts Education Center was to be built. And is that one of the issues on this report card? The fact that they haven't carried out what has been promised for decades, in which actually people have been voting, they voted money for this, this Performance Education Center.
If I could, Rick,
Yes.
Because of that, the center is going forward in a smaller footprint on what's called the upper reservoir, but it is still, we've got to get it done before the really huge private housing development starts taking over the lower reservoir, which was not a property of the college, but leased to the college since 1945 or something. So we're hoping that a viable smaller footprint will go forward. I was in meetings today about that. And a few members of the board did try to negotiate what is in the rules, which is said if you are going to give away if you're going to sell public property, you should offer it to institutions before. And the board put a resolution on the tables 5 years ago to try to do that, but then the members tabled it. The members that are incumbents tabled it. And so the district really, I think, missed a window there to keep that property in lease to the college that it has been for many years. But we are very much hoping that at least something can be salvaged on the upper reservoir, which is on land that does belong to the school.
And we're talking with Madelyn Mueller. She's the chair of the music department, San Francisco City College, and also joining us on WorkWeek is Rick Baum, and he's a lecturer, a member of AFT 2121. And Rick, the situation of part-time faculty and students, how are they being affected by the actions of the Board of Trustees?
I'd like to maybe first go over what's on the report card and then look at the picture of what's happened to the college in recent years that Madelyn was referring to. So the report card has different topics: protecting educational opportunities, putting students first and the college first, protecting student access during the pandemic, and responding to the community. And the report card gave them an F on every one of these categories. Two of the people who are running in the Board of Trustees election, Tom Temprano and Chanel Williams, are running for re-election. And they were given an opportunity to respond to the report card. 6 candidates did, but those 2 refused to do so, as did 2 other candidates who have been working as aides to San Francisco supervisors. Temprano is the chief of staff for Supervisor Mandelman, and all 4 of them did not respond to the report card. But I just want to give you the big picture of what's happened to City College since the accreditation crisis started. I just looked up figures today from the state chancellor, and in 2011, City College has had 90,352 students. As of last year, it had 55,000, so that's a decline of 35,000. And for the fall term, we were told, the college put out figures the other day, and the fall term shows that there's a decline of almost a fourth of credit students from 25,000 last fall in 2019 to 20,000 in 2020. I'm rounding it off. For non-credits, even more dramatic. Their numbers went from almost 14,000 to 6,600. So their numbers during the pandemic for the fall term have declined by 52%, which is a tremendous blow. We expect a decline from the pandemic, although usually when there's a crisis like this, even more people want to go to school and get training because they've lost their jobs and they want training for new jobs. More dramatically is what's happened to faculty. The number of faculty has gone from 810 full-timers to now, as of August, 538. So that's a decline of not that much. It'd be more like about over a third. Part-timers have gone from 1,000 to 525. That means that City College has a dubious distinction of having more full-timers than part-timers, which is unusual for community colleges. And that's because for the fall term, the administration eliminated 250 part-time jobs, as well as cut 800 classes. So they're destroying the educational opportunities of students, and the board has gone along with this.
I mean, they have argued, the trustees, first of all, they supported Rocha as the president or the chancellor of community college. He was saying that they had to cut the students in order to save the college, to cut costs. Madelyn, was that the case?
Always said, well, we will have fewer sections, but there will be bigger sections, so the students will still be there. Well, that doesn't happen. That's not the way students' lives happen. Maybe it happens in Barstow or someplace where you have students all living at home in a small geographic radius. But it doesn't, he knows that, he knew that. It's not going to happen in a big school. You cut sections, then you cut students, period. So this is what he would say to the board. Yes, we're saving money, we're being fiscally whatever, but we're not losing students because they'll just take bigger classes. He knew that wasn't true. The other thing about reduction, it's a little less direct sometimes. The students find tremendous barriers in just getting through the technology at City College, of all places, head of a tech center. And we can't seem to find the right way for students, a funny thing, the right way for students to actually enroll in classes. People try and try and try, and the system just keeps spitting them out or whatever. The non-credit issue, for example, that Rick just brought up, was because they just didn't have a way to have non-English speakers who are the bread and butter of the non-credit program. That's what we're doing for the most part. A lot of that is ESL training. And you have to have a different way you have to have really people in front of you. They have to understand, they have to have translators. That's just been set up this week. I just read the letter today from the interim chancellor, Dr. Verdian, saying, and welcome to the campus to some of the non-credit students who now in person, socially distanced and very safe and all that, but it's taken till October to get a proper, appropriate, and viable registration procedure for thousands of very, very needy ESL students. So we're hoping those numbers will go up, but just the technology and the logistics is so broken. And the board, I must say, they try to enroll and they can't get in. So, who knows what's going on there. It just seems like everything that goes wrong is to the detriment of the college. Why can't something go wrong and help people? It's always makes it harder for students. That's just too suspicious to me.
And there was an effort to get extra funding from City College, or from the city of San Francisco, or City College. And the board members did not really lobby publicly, speak out in favor of that money. Rick, what has been the role of the board in relationship to this like privatization that we've talked about earlier, selling off land, the golf campus, and others?
Well, they've been cooperating with it. They're closing campuses. The 33 golf, which used to be the administration facilities, which needed a lot of work on it, apparently that was leased to a private developer, and they were supposed to get a windfall of money for it, but because it took so long, I think it may end up not helping the college at all. I do want to go back to something that Madelyn was talking about, because one of the big issues that we keep on getting hammered about is student equity efforts. That it's very important that most students at City College are students of color, but when you cut the classes, you're cutting their educational opportunities. And when you make classes bigger, that also interferes with their chances of getting a better education, because they won't have as close a contact with their teachers. So while they will say that they're in favor of student equity, they're undermining that possibility by all the cuts in classes that they're making that prevent students from being able to sign up for classes. And a good example of that is what you're talking about, the effort to get money from the city, which happened last November when then Chancellor Rocha suddenly announces a huge deficit. And he very quickly cut 300 classes and said that the cuts would save the college a little less than $3 million. So we made an effort, there was a grassroots effort to get the funding from the city, which had a surplus of funds at the time. This is before the pandemic. And 7 of the 11 supervisors supported it. But while the process was going through, Rocha wrote an email to the mayor and the supervisors discouraging this money to restore the classes. So not only did Rocha do that, which I can't imagine any executive of any organization discouraging funding that would provide more educational opportunities for students by restoring the classes that he had suddenly cut, but the board was kind of missing in action. We didn't see the board participating in trying to get this money from the city, which a majority of supervisors supported, but unfortunately the mayor vetoed it. So that money wasn't restored. And then they decided in January, according to the person who became the interim chancellor, before the pandemic, they're expecting an influx of extra money and a cost of living increase. But nevertheless, they decided to cut out the 250 part-time instructors and cut some 800 classes, even though they're getting more money than they were getting the year before. As things turned out, the state did give them as much money as they had the year before with no cost of living increase, but nevertheless, they still made these massive cuts in classes of some 800 classes just for one particular term.
And the older adults program, that's been destroyed. ESL program for particularly immigrants, non-English speaking, has been hard hit. This has been all done by the present Board of Trustees, and they got rid of Rocha after he did a lot of this damage, and then paid him $400,000, which actually would have saved Fort Mason. So
there is a state mandate, if you will, from the state chancellor's office, who was a dear friend. I mean, they admitted to each other, Rocha and my dear friend, the state chancellor. The state chancellor's office wants the community colleges of California to all downsize, and for ease of management, they said. This came from a friend of mine whose stepmother-in-law was on the state board of governors. And this was discussed over dinner time at various meetings with the state BOG, that the state chancellor wants the community college system to be run from the state, like UC and CSU. One labor contract fits all kind of stuff. And in order to do so, for ease of management, the state has pretty much let out, and it was in the student success seventh chapter of recommendations, that the state should have then all 114 colleges, where none of them should be above 10,000 students, for ease of management, to be run as a state one-size-fits-all. This does away with the community college concept, which is in code, but they don't pay attention, and turns the whole system into a junior college. These are the marching orders that come through chancellors to administrations to boards up and down the state. And there's some pushback because we're a community college still legally. But I think everything's being done to keep in touch, in line with these directives from the state. City College is an outlier. We have so many things that are different that's why they illegally tried to take us over during the so-called accreditation crisis. They made up problems. Well, now there are problems, but they made them up so that we would be more in line with the cookie cutter, I call it Stepford colleges, of the others, and that we wouldn't have non-credit, and we wouldn't have older adults, and we wouldn't have Fort Mason, and we wouldn't have the large size. We just wouldn't. And I know this is what they had planned during the takeover years, and I think they're still just planning it, and our board is not fighting it off.
And there is the issue of Lumina Foundation and ALEC, which have passed legislation supported by the Democratic Party politicians. Ting, Chu, and Weiner all supported this Lumina. ALEC supported legislation that basically punishes the community colleges, unless students graduate within 2 years. A lot of working class students can't afford to graduate because they have to work full-time jobs and go to college, so it extends the time they have to be in college. It seems like the corporatization is driven, in fact, by the state of California and California San Francisco legislators who are supporting the downsizing of the community college. Where has the board stood on this issue, and have they taken up these politicians who are supporting this legislation which punishes San Francisco Community College? Rick?
Well, I think they're cooperating with it. Obviously, they're cooperating with the downsizing. They've cooperated with the turning over of the PUC public property Balboa Reservoir to a private for-profit developer that will drive down the student enrollment, because many students unfortunately have to drive to school and they need a place to park, and there will be a reduction in parking. The other thing is the ESL is particularly being impacted. Among the layoff faculty were all part-time faculty that had less than 14 years at the college. And the students who enroll in the non-credit ESL classes are the students who are going to learn the sufficient English skills so that they can enroll in credit classes and then move on out of the non-credit department. So by reducing the opportunities for students to take these types of classes, they're actually in the long term are going to be further hurting the enrollment that will bring down even, reduce us even more so. The other thing the big thing that's happening is that this has always been the case, but more and more the college is being turned into a training center to train people for work, not to educate them. There's a difference. Certainly students should have the opportunity to get the training that they want for a particular skill or job, but the purpose of the college at the same time is to educate people so that they are socially engaged, so that they're more worldly. And more, the vision is to just narrowly give them a training, get them in and out of the college very rapidly, and so that they have a certificate, or so that they can transfer to a 4-year school. The idea of having programs for the community, like the older adult program, is not part of this agenda. The board has gone along with all these kinds of program changes. I mean, some of them may speak out occasionally and say something that you want to hear that's contrary to this, but the adopted policies all fit in. I mean, they're about to adopt a new budget, and the new budget calls for further cuts in the part-time faculty and even in the full-time faculty. So this is what they've been approving, and they don't question it. They seem to accept it. That's why we need new leadership on the Board of Trustees.
One of the issues has been the Evans campus, which is important to the Black community in Hunters Point Bayview, and that apparently has been really harmed by the cutbacks. They want to allow the PUC, they want to pay $30 million to the PUC to build a complex for the PUC. At the same time, the vocational classes have been cut back. They've lost vocational classes, which are critical to get training to do the jobs that are needed. Particularly their airport, they're shutting down the airport training program and moving it to the Evans campus. It seems like it's organized chaos. I mean, Madelyn, is there some organization of this whole chaos that the Board of Trustees are voting and apparently approving these massacres going on at San Francisco City College, the present Board of Trustees?
Well, the Evans issue is something that people are trying to figure out. Rocha left a lot of promises. We can't find paper trails that well, but we do find minutes of promises, oral, and then people saying, we hope that they pay attention to what he promised. But it's still something that it has to be brought up above from under rocks and figure out, what did he promise, and is it really good for the community? Many of the students have said they would much prefer to be able to take the vast array of courses at the college, but the transportation east to west in San Francisco is very problematic. So it's hard for people who live in Bayview Hunter Point neighborhood to go west to the major campus. That has to be solved. That's a city problem. But that's what the students would prefer. And meanwhile, there's not enough space over in the neighborhood, and yet people are all at odds and ends. That has to be straightened out. The other thing about training for programs, and what Rick said, you want a broader education. There is a second pandemic going on now, which I keep bringing up. It's a mental health suicide pandemic, and the numbers are getting atrocious. So quality of life, yes, train for jobs, but you have to feel okay as a person. And so being a music teacher, I know how important it is for my music teachers, for my music students who are in computer science and in certain CTE programs. They desperately need to be able to play the guitar. Otherwise, they're just going to go, crazy, literally, and suicidal. So the college has the ability, it should, to maintain that kind of balance of programs. We're online now, but we're doing okay. There's stuff that works even online in the arts and even in dance. People are up in front of their screens doing things. And we need that so that the second pandemic doesn't take over the world, because it will. And then the other thing about the student pathways, it's called, making them go quickly into completion doctrines. What you mentioned, I guess it was Steve mentioned, that the students have to work. Well, they don't. What they do is that they get them to take student loans, because that's the only way they can do it full time. Working and going to school is actually a good thing to do. But they're being pressured. The students are being pressured, especially minority students. The very worst to get trapped in this are, the data, the last one I saw was African-American women. Lifelong debt, indentureship, modern slavery, if you will. Yeah. And forcing people to take student loans and lying to them and saying, oh, just take a loan, do it full time, get in, good out, and you'll get a good job and you'll be in the middle class is a lie. And a trillion, what is it, $1.7 trillion of student debt that you can't get out of. That's entrapment, that's indentureship. And that's what they're doing and pretending that it's helping minorities and people who are in a lower fiscal bracket and veterans. They're all being trapped into this in and out in a hurry and take a loan and yeah, kumbaya. And that's not what's happening. And that also is leading to a spike in suicides.
And another issue in your report card is the restricted public comments at meetings and the transparency violation, the Brown Act, recording of meetings. And actually, I was at a meeting that was held, which was required to have been recorded, and they just ignored that. And their legal counsel said it was okay to ignore that. And these board members said, fine, go ahead, don't follow the rules. Rick, it seems like there's a complete contempt for transparency and allowing the public to know what's going on, not even recording meetings when they're required under the school rules and under Brown Act.
That is a problem. I mean, now the meetings are held over Zoom, and I just don't know how common a practice this is, but they don't allow you to see who's participating, who's in attendance at the meetings. They turn off that function. They turn off the chat function so people can't communicate with each other. They do allow for public comments, but the board, for the years that I've gone to meetings, they have a period of time for public comments, and people say many compelling great ideas about what could improve the school, but they're largely ignored. They don't respond to them. And then when they take up their agenda, there isn't time later for discussions of any of the issues. So it's kind of like, what you could say, like some people use the term, it's a facade, it's a farce that, yeah, they will say they're adhering to democracy by allowing the public comments, but it's an act that gets people nowhere. I mean, for years, people have talked about why some of the class cuts are detrimental to the school and to enrollment, and they've totally ignored that. I mean, they used to be told by the chancellor, and by a couple of chancellors that I'm aware of, that you can cut classes and increase enrollment. I'd always ask questions like, where are schools where that's happened? And they could never come up with any where that has actually happened. And you just hear this, it happens over and over again. Madelyn probably has more to say about the board meetings because I think she goes to more of them, is more familiar with them.
Well, one of the issues was, as far as transparency, was the vote by the Board of Trustees to give $400,000 as a go-away gift to Rocha, who had done tremendous damage in the thing. And it was defended by Chanel Williams, the present president of the Board of Trustees, as completely necessary and for the college to do that. And she and Tom Temprano, who are running now, have both carried on with these actions. The payoff of $400,000 to Rocha, who they hired against the advice of the union, the faculty, the community, that he not be hired because of his record at Pasadena Community College. Where is that, and why did that happen? I mean, here he does great damage to the college, and then they give him a $400,000 going away gift, and they don't have money for Fort Mason and other and the students who are losing their classes, and the part-time faculty who are getting laid off. Madelyn?
That happened in closed session, and that's exactly back to the Brown Act. There are certain things that you're just not supposed to keep in closed session. But I think they got a lot of complaints at the time. But given the fact that they don't pay attention, especially now when things are online even more, we don't even know during Zoom meetings if there are any board members listening. I mean, there's no way, at least when you were in the room with them, you could tell they weren't paying attention. And there's certain body language signals that could go on, but that's gone away. So the issue, and it's not completely dead, the thing with Rocha. We have some faculty looking into some legal situations that did go under the radar, but it was not something that we could get to, because I tried once to do a Brown Act violation situation a couple of years ago, and they just blew it off, which they can do unless you're willing to go into a lot of money opposing. And then the outcome generally up and down the state is that the Brown Act is good for publicity purposes, perhaps, but it doesn't have any real teeth. Nothing, as far as we could tell when we went into prosecuting under the Brown Act. There seems to be a general blank wall, you get to a wall and you don't get beyond it, but you can get some publicity, and we're still working on that. We are.
And I think this report card goes over many of the issues. And what has been the response of the present Board of Trustees to this report card?
Tell them, Rick.
Well, they were all offered a chance. Well, the whole Board of Trustees has not been sent the postcard. The report card. Only the two incumbents, but we might want to send it to all the trustees. Of the four that were incumbents who are now, their term will expire soon, two of them decided not to run for re-election to remain on the board, and two of them did decide to run, but they did not respond, as did 6 candidates did respond to it. So six candidates responded to the report card. They had a chance to write up their response, which we're sharing with people. But Williams and Temprano did not respond. And they also had another opportunity. What they always say at City College, we've got to put students first. Some student groups organized a forum for the candidates. And Temprano was invited and did not respond. Williams responded and said she had a meeting with the Democratic Party that evening, so she would not participate in their forum. And then the two candidates who are aides to supervisors, Wong and Zhu, if I'm saying his name right, they also did not respond, which is really, I found that very insulting. Here's students who are the key group of people at the college wanting to learn about the board candidates, and these 4 people did not attend their evening, 3 of them not even responding. So, that's just an ongoing problem. I do want to say, I just want to reemphasize this notion that we make public comments at board meetings. There are a slew of public comments made as to why Rocha should not be hired, given his record, and it's totally ignored. They hired him, and then they're ending up paying him off what will cost close to $400,000, and then they hire another temporary chancellor, and he's getting paid $340,000, which is an astounding amount of money as far as I'm concerned, plus benefits. So he's costing $400,000 between the search for him and his benefits, probably even more than $400,000. And then they plan to hire a new chancellor within about 7 or 8 months. So it's just an ongoing expenditures that aren't being utilized for what is the purpose of the college, which is to provide classes and instruction for students. And that's what's getting cut, so that they can pay consultants over $4 million a year, pay more, about another $900,000 for lawyers compared to a couple of years ago. And it just is not going to the purpose of the college, and the board has been approving these things.
Okay, well, I want to thank both of you for your commentary on this report card, which people can go to ccscollective.org and get a look at this report card and contact the candidates and the board members who are running again this year and ask them where they stand on the issues in the report card. So I want to thank both of you for joining us on WorkWeek and for your work that you did on putting this report card together. Thank you for joining us on WorkWeek.